Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of St Helens Borough Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor David Baines. I'm a ward councillor for Windle and I'm the leader of St Helens Borough Council. Just before we get into the formal agenda, I'm going to ask members of the Cabinet to introduce themselves so everyone knows who's present. So first of all, in no particular order, Councillor Andy Bowden.
Good afternoon, my name's Councillor Andy Bowden. I represent the Power Ward and I am the Cabinet Member for Environment and Transport.
Thanks, Andy. Councillor Burns.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Anthony Burns, Councillor for Haydock and the Cabinet Member for Public Health, Leisure, Libraries and Heritage.
Thank you. Councillor Bell.
Good afternoon, I'm Jeannie Bell, Councillor for Newton and Cabinet Member for Stronger, Safer Communities.
Councillor Grocott.
Good afternoon, I'm Kate Grocott. I'm Councillor for Power Ward and Cabinet Member for Education, Skills and Business.
Councillor Quinn.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marlene Quinn, Councillor for West Park Ward and Cabinet Member for Integrated Health and Social Care.
Councillor Bond.
Afternoon, I'm Martin Bond. I'm a councillor for Haydock and the Cabinet Member for Finance and Governance.
Councillor Charlton.
Good afternoon, Councillor Charlton, Councillor for Fatto Heath and Cabinet Member for Children and Young People.
Councillor Macaulay.
Thanks, Leader. Good afternoon, everyone. Richard Macaulay, Thatcher Heath Ward Councillor and Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Planning.
Thanks. Councillor Gomez Asprom.
Good afternoon, I'm Seb Gomez Asprom, Councillor for Newton the Willows and Cabinet Member for Reset and Recovery.
Thank you. And we're joined by two members of scrutiny today to comment on scrutiny reports that we're bringing back. So first up, Councillor Mansi Uddin.
Hi everyone, I'm Mansi, I'm a councillor in Windle.
Thank you. And Councillor Long.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a councillor for Mossbank Ward and chair of the Children and Young People Services Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you. And I think that's everyone. Apologies, my screen's frozen, so I will try and carry on from the agenda as best I can, but let me know if I've missed anyone or if I miss anything going on. I'll try and hopefully it'll figure itself out in a second. So item number 1 is apologies for absence. Joanna, have we got any?
No, we've had no apologies, Leader.
Thank you. The minutes of the meeting from the 7th of October before us, are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. 3 is declarations of interest. And 4 is issues arising from overview and scrutiny. 4A, Councillor Bowden.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Can I begin by thanking Councillor Rudin and members of the task group for their work on this report and the recommendations that they have put forward. And I welcome the opportunity to respond, and the details of the actions we will take are set out in Appendix 1. Whilst the focus of the task group went further than its initial remit, which was the use of paper and plastics within the council and how to minimise their usage, this expansion of what they looked at has to be welcomed. The recommendations sit well with Councillor Rudin's motion to Council last year on the climate emergency, and with Councillor Hattersley's excellent motion to Council last week in support of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the commitment to ensuring our policies and practices will work towards meeting those aims. The response to the report in Appendix 1 sets out practical steps we will make to reduce the use of paper and plastics. And whilst progress has not been as fast as we'd have liked since Councillor Rudding's additional motion, due to officers and councillors' focus being rightly on addressing the pandemic and its consequences for our community, whilst ensuring services are maintained, but progress is now being made. And for me, key within the recommendations is the establishment of a councillor-led climate action group, a commission as I referred to it in a previous cabinet meeting, with the support of a senior officer, with a remit much wider than that suggested by the task group itself. This should be seen alongside our focus on the environment. For example, within our local plan, our work at Liverpool City region level on a green sustainable transport plan, and the actions agreed at last council through Councillor Hattersley's motion. I believe this demonstrates a real commitment to the climate emergency that we all face. And I, of course, Leader, recognise that there will be cries from the usual quarters of hypocrisy. We heard it last week at full council, as we encourage and attract multi-million-pound investments in our borough, bringing jobs and opportunities to our residents. But it is not a zero-sum game, and supporting action on climate change and sustainable development goals is not incompatible with the creation of jobs and the building of houses for those that need them. Indeed, it is my view that it complements and helps to meet them, as well as being at the core of my principles as a Labour politician, especially as someone representing a community in need of those jobs, and at a time when we see unemployment rocketing and redundancies, as has been reported this week, at record levels. Sustainable development and addressing the climate emergency is not about saying no to a development just because it's near your home or your default position. That's not being green. It's very often just political opportunism, job snobbery and NIMBYism. It's more about self-interest and sustainability, while at the same time denying opportunities for housing and jobs and contradicting the aims of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I do apologise, Chair, for slightly digressing, but this report and the recommendations has given me the opportunity to speak on the wider issue of climate change. This is a good and timely piece of work by the committee, and again I recommend the work of the panel and Councillor Rudin on it, particularly with the establishment of the commission and what will flow from that. It will make a difference, and it will continue to show how we as a council, through its words and actions, is taking the climate emergency seriously, and I would ask you to support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Bowden, and I just want to second absolutely everything you've said there. Fantastic speech. Councillor Uddin, would you like to make any comment?
Hi, Councillor Bowden. I just wanted to second again everything you said. I'm really glad you highlighted the Climate Commission. I think for me that was definitely one of the key recommendations, and I welcome your intention to bring that forward. Also, just thank you in general for your response to, and comments, and I'm looking forward to working with you on this and helping in any way that I can.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Uddin. Any more comments from members? Okay, is that agreed then?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you, everyone. 4B is the Cabinet response to scrutiny review of apprenticeships for looked after children and care leavers. Councillor Charlton.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Long and members of the scrutiny panel for bringing the recommendations for apprenticeships for the children we look after and care leavers. And I'd like to say I really welcome this report. I was involved with this when it first went to scrutiny, so it's really nice to see the journey that it's gone on. Again, I'd like to remind everyone about what the term corporate parent means. It's about a collective responsibility of the council, elected members, employees and partner agencies for providing the best possible care and safeguarding for the children and young people that we look after. In essence, we are the family firm, and through our collective responsibility, we can and should offer our young people the best opportunities that we can. I'm pleased that the action plan in Appendix 1 is well underway, and some of the actions have already been completed. through our continued investment in children's services, we've already appointed a permanent education, employment and training coordinator. And what this dedicated role has enabled us to do is support our young people in their journey for looking for employment, education and training, which in turn improves outcomes for children and young people. I'm pleased that within the action plan that's detailed in Appendix 1, it talks about involving children and young people by asking them about the type of opportunities and apprenticeships that we want. We talk about voice of the child and listening to children and young people, and things like that really do have an impact for our young people. It talks about the engagement of our ambassadors programme and discussing with them about the work experiences and opportunities that they can offer the children and young people, and also about working with partners from the DWP and with our schools, with the Raising Aspirations programme. So when we talk about collective responsibility, this really shows that we are taking a collective responsibility to support our children and young people. And more importantly, it shows that we've got aspirations for our children and young people. So once again, I'd like to thank Councillor Long and members of the scrutiny for bringing this to Cabinet. And I would hope that we will agree the action plan that's put before us. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Charlton. Councillor Long, would you like to make any comments?
Yes, please, if I may. Thank you. Can I just thank you for what Councillor Charlton has just said. I would like to say just a few words to highlight the importance of this review as well as scrutiny chair. Among the many challenges our care experienced young people have is the challenge of getting a decent job. 40% of 19 to 21 care experienced young people pre-pandemic were unemployed, and we all know that will increase going forward. So like any good and responsible parent, I'm sure we all agree that as corporate parents, we must do our best to help the many hundreds of young people we look after to have a good start to their working life. From talking with officers during the review, I'm clear that fantastic work is already being done, but I'm also certain that the actions arising out of this report, which, by the way, also went further than its original remit, that those actions are a good contribution to take the work further and will make a real difference to the careers advice, the work experience and the work opportunities our care experienced young people will receive. Also, just to let you know that the final part of the report, looking at the points in recommendation 9, will be forthcoming already early in the new year. That's it from me. Thanks.
Thanks, Tricia. Thanks, Councillor Long, and thanks, Councillor Charlton. Any more comments on that? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tricia. Item 5, improving take-up of 2-year-old early education entitlement. Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say that narrowing the gap between disadvantaged children and the better off peers that's already present when they start school at the age of 4 is our driving mission in politics. Giving all children, as we've just discussed in the earlier item, the opportunity to succeed and have the best start in life is one of our top priorities as a council. Our schools, colleges and the early years settings in our borough are key partners, and I know they share our mission. The 15-hour entitlement to free early years education for low-income 2-year-olds is one of the key policies that helps us achieve that. We know that high-quality childcare plays an important part in narrowing that gap in educational attainment between children from the lowest income families and those from middle-income families. Currently, the picture across St Helens is that the level of take-up of these 2-year-old places is decreasing. Parents have told us that since universal credit was introduced, the system of checking eligibility for these free places can be complicated and bureaucratic. Consequently, parents have been put off from applying. A solution to this problem has been identified, which is to use an alternative source of data provided by DWP and HMRC. This can be used to confirm access to the free places, and parents simply receive a letter through the post explaining their child is eligible, which they can present to their provider of choice. Other local authorities have adopted this approach, sometimes referred to as the golden ticket approach, and have seen increases in take-up, often up to at least 90%. There are obvious benefits to children attending high quality settings, and I'm really pleased that currently 100% of providers in St Helens Borough have received a judgment from Ofsted that is good or outstanding. So parents shouldn't have any problems finding a high quality provider close to where they live. Finally, Chair, I just want to take this opportunity to thank our early years sector in what's been a really difficult year, supporting our families across the borough during the coronavirus pandemic. Many of them stayed open for the children of key workers to enable them to go out and do their jobs. And since wider reopening, I know they've had to make a huge number of changes to keep staff and children safe in what has been a very difficult business environment for many. They work really closely with us as a council, and I just want to put on record my thanks to the whole sector. So I ask Cabinet to approve the recommendations in the report before you.
Thank you, Councillor Groker. Any questions or comments from colleagues? Okay, I just want to absolutely endorse everything you've just said, Kate. This is absolutely crucial. You said it's a question of social justice, and we want to close that gap between our children from more deprived areas and backgrounds and those who have a more fortunate start in life. And this is part of that mission. So absolutely fully support this. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 6 is Q2 Performance Report 2020-21. Councillor Gomez-Aspron.
Thanks, Chair. The performance report, or Q2 for 2020-21, provides an ongoing assessment of the council's performance during a period of unprecedented challenge due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The impact of the pandemic is reflected across all of the council's priorities, with the majority of indicators being impacted to a varying degree. As the onset of the pandemic impeded the council's ability to set meaningful targets and review its range of measures, the report is presented with the caveat that work to deliver a step change in the council's approach to performance management is still ongoing, and that's featured in the report, including a review of performance indicators and their targets linked to outcomes sought and the development of the borough strategy. The performance report has 6 priority sections, with the performance at Q2 against the current set of indicators evidencing both positives, performance and improvement together with the challenges across the priorities. Where the performance improvement is required, a summary of the action to achieve this is set out within the report. I don't intend to go on much longer because I imagine individual cabinet members would like to speak on their own areas. But I think one of the key things we need to make a point of is some of these indicators have been heavily impacted by COVID, like we just said, and we are in a position where we're reviewing the information we put forward, because we need to make sure these measures are measuring the things that we want to deliver as a council, and it's vital that we get them right. So it's a good opportunity to review that between Q2 and Q3. The recommendations are in the report, and the recommendation is for Cabinet to work with appropriate executive directors to address specific areas for performance improvement, and work with appropriate executive directors in agreeing proposals for the future range of appropriate performance measures and indicators to be presented in Cabinet reports and their respective targets. I'm happy to answer any questions or comments, but I imagine Cabinet will be lining up to speak because it covers more of their areas and the whole remit of the council. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Gomez-Aspron. Okay, Councillor Bond.
thanks for that to the Deputy Leader. I welcome the chance to speak on this within my own portfolio rather than introducing it, because Seven now take responsibility from me for this particular report. So I spent quite a lot of time over the past 18 months urging my colleagues in meetings to speak about their own performance indicators, so it would be churlish of me not to speak about my own now. There are only 4 under priority 6 that fall within the finance and governance portfolio, and one of them is worth noting. It's actually it's a good news story from the point of view of the others, and that's the levels of sickness and absence per employee over the time period, and that's credit to the staff of the authority who, in this most difficult of times, have worked from home in really strange circumstances, and sickness absence has gone right down because people need the authority to assist them. We know that, so it's worth making a comment on that. And the others really, to some extent, are impacted by COVID. The last one is of note, which is the percentage of customers satisfied with their first point of contact with the council through its contact centre. Now, there's a fairly ambitious target there for 2021 of an 85% satisfaction rating, and it's 76.6 as it stands, which is off target, but by less than 10%, but nevertheless it's off target. It should be noted that I think there's been a significant increase in people contacting and asking for support, so it needs to be set against that background. And also, in terms of improving that performance, then there are a new suite of IT measures that will be coming into play that will make things easier and hopefully give quicker and better outcomes for residents. So I'd hope to see that improve. And last, by no means least, the impact on council tax and business rate collection. Now, these are figures which are quite concerning, but I've talked about that in a different arena in terms of the impact on income for the authority at large. What I would say in those is these are at the whim of the pandemic, and behind these figures and these numbers and the arrows pointing whichever way they're pointing are real people, real families, real human beings who've lost their jobs, families impacted by that, business people who may have spent their lives building up their business who, because of the pandemic, no fault of their own, have lost their businesses. So whilst I'd like to give a resounding report on how we're going to improve that, we are in the pandemic, and the pandemic is directly affecting that. And we should always remember, when we look at these dry figures, that these are real people and real families that are affected by the pandemic that impact these figures. So that's what I'd like to say. We're working hard on one aspect of it. The other aspects of it really are at the whim of the pandemic. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Bond. Councillor Bowden.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to briefly touch on a couple of items, some positive, some unfortunately not so positive. In terms of what we could describe as good news and positivity within the performance report, it's been good to see, working with the Metro Mayor Steve Rotherham, how we've levered in funding to support highway maintenance and the infrastructure, and develop and improve walking and cycle features across the borough. And it's been touched on, the pandemic and lockdown and everything, and it's an opportunity to highlight just how important our green spaces are. And it's worth remembering, Chair, that over 10% of our borough is formal green space, not just green space, of which we have a high percentage of in itself, but formal green space maintained by us as an authority across our 19 parks. And these have been vital for communities and individuals to make use of during this time, as it's been more difficult to get out and about, etc. There are areas naturally where we would like to see improvements. Recycling has certainly been down a little bit during this period, in part because of the lockdown, yes, and the actions we had to take around recycling. But it is heartening to see that we've had over 27,000 people sign up again for the permits for the green waste collection, which is really great news to see. And hopefully we will continue to see improvements in recycling as we work with the Merseyside Waste Authority on their service. What has been increased, and it's well known and well seen across many of our communities, and an understandable frustration to them has been the heightening incidences of fly tipping. This has been put down in the report, as you will see, has been attributed to lockdown, the result of the closure of recycling centres, and indeed the fact that people are in a position to actually see it happening and reporting it. I don't particularly hold with that view. I think that is giving excuses to individuals partaking in poor behaviour and antisocial behaviour, and it's good to know that so many fixed penalty notices have been issued, and I think last month we were operating, certainly one recent month, we were operating at nearly a fixed penalty a day on those participating in antisocial behaviour. Only today, Councillor Grunwald in Rainhill reported through to me a dumped sofa in one of our parks. That's not down to a lack of access to a recycling centre or lockdown or any other reason other than poor behaviour and a total disregard for the community in which individuals live. And we must be firm and robust in the way we tackle that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Councillor Bell.
Thank you. So in my area of the report, there's a total of 6 indicators that have been reported on in Q2. However, one of the youth justice measures, which relies on national data, has been temporarily suspended by the Ministry of Justice, so we're unable to report that at present. In relation to that measure around youth offending rates, though, we do know that performance has improved significantly. So the position we anticipate will change for the better when that national data is published eventually. But the Youth Justice Service, to their credit, have worked really hard during COVID and during the lockdowns, finding completely new and innovative ways to engage and support young people within the service. So I just want to say thank you to them really for their work on that, because they've done incredibly well. Obviously, there's a significant focus in St Helens to reduce offending in looked after children, especially when you think that, you know, around 30% of the Youth Justice Service is made up of that cohort. So in order to improve that particular indicator, we've established a reducing offending in children looked after steering group, and that was established over the summer period, and work's been undertaken to capture the lived experience of children who are looked after and their links to offending, because you need to understand a problem if you want to address it, and hopefully that's what we'll get. There's a strategy and an action plan that's been put together, setting out a clear response to reduce that offending, and that's about to be finalised. And alongside it, there's a real strong focus on some of the early intervention and prevention work, and there's detail of that in the report, so I won't go through it right now. It was good to see that performance in relation to the number of repeat cases managed by MARAC has continued to record an improvement since April 2020. There's been a lot of work gone into that, and the MARAC is actually continuing to work really well through COVID and lockdowns. Really good attendance from passes online. You know, despite the fact that they're operating virtually, it's working well. Q2 did see a rise in recorded reports of hate crime to agencies, and the majority of those incidents continue to be racial in nature, followed by homophobic and transphobic incidents, which is clearly not something that we want to see. The indicator shows that's what we want to see. We want to see an increase in reports because we know it's underreported. So often that indicator isn't very clear, and this goes back to what Councillor Gomez-Aspron was saying about the review of performance indicators and what we want them to actually show. We continue to monitor the reported incidents of hate crime really closely and promote action as well. So we're tackling hate crime within a multi-agency approach through our community safety partnership with all of the relevant agencies, from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, police, fire, housing. You know, everybody's got an eye on this and we're working hard on it. In the period April to September 2020, there's been a total of 3,249 ASB reports, that's antisocial behaviour, and that's attributed, we we believe, to the impact of lockdown in the first 3 months and the sheer volume of calls that were related to non-adherence to COVID-19 regulations. We've started to see that a decline in ASB reports are happening with the easing of restrictions, but we'll continue to monitor that, especially as we go into this next lockdown. But to help address some of those issues, there's a new post of an antisocial behaviour officer which started in August 2020, and we have a specific subgroup of the Safer St Helens executive specifically to look at and coordinate ASB response with our partners. We'll keep monitoring it over the remainder of the year, and we'll make sure that reports are brought regularly to keep people updated on that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeannie. Councillor Burns.
Thanks very much, Leader, and thanks, Deputy Leader, for compiling the report. My portfolio stretches across the priorities of the Council. This report details were the main chunk of the work in Priority 2, promoting good health, independence and care across our communities, and Priority 5.2, creating a green, thriving and vibrant place to be proud of. And it tells some good news in there. The Council's plan for reset and recovery within Priority 2 was developed collaboratively during Q2 with input from Council services and a broad range of partners. The staying safe priorities being of particular importance to my portfolio, ensuring people can remain safe and are supported to meet the ongoing challenge of the pandemic. The public health team continued to play a pivotal role in managing the pandemic, and a particular note is the formation of a team from across the council and partners with staff working 7 days a week to deal with local outbreaks. Additional capacity has been recruited within the infection control team, and we are looking to recruit further to the core team too. A team have been working hard to prevent outbreaks in various settings, including schools, care homes, pubs and food preparation sites. There has also been targeted work in neighbourhoods where clusters of cases have been identified to try and prevent wider community spread. And this week we've seen the campaign and the hashtag Councils Can, and it has been tremendous to see all the posts on social media celebrating the work done by this Labour-run council to serve the people of St Helens Borough, especially through the pandemic. Working, of course, with some fantastic businesses and charities and volunteers across the borough, and this has been in spite of the lack of direction and floundering of the government. On the other side of the portfolio in this quarter, it saw the phased reopening of the library and the leisure services, which has been overwhelmingly positive, with lots of residents visiting the libraries over this period and just over 4,000 books issued. It was also great to see the archives reopened, with services being supplemented by Facebook Live tours, and of course in the last quarter we saw the new town centre library based at the World of Glass open on the 14th of September. This new facility has been extremely popular, with all the usual library services you can expect, also including a computer suite and study area, especially important for people to be able to access online help and support. Coinciding with the reopening of the library buildings was a phased return of leisure centres in this period, and we took it slowly to make sure our members and residents remained safe, but booking facilities and the hard work of the staff made it a welcome return to these services. And although this did mean the reduction in the numbers who can visit and use the facilities at any one time, the feedback from customers has been very positive. In fact, it's been fantastic. Our leisure centre staff and sports development team are amazing and have tremendously contributed to keeping people safe and healthy throughout these difficult times. Not one outbreak in any of these services, in spite of what the government initially may have suggested via their imposed initial Tier 3 restrictions on St Helens, which was thankfully overturned with the hard work of our leader and Labour leaders across the city region. So what's performing well? The transition to digital and mobile services to compensate for those sites which are not safe to reopen yet has been good. The home delivery library service was open to anyone shielding or vulnerable and tripled its users during lockdown. That was a huge success. And one programme specifically, which was great, was the Arts and Libraries team, who developed an hour correspondence. And this was to try and combat isolation for people that don't engage or communicate online. And it involved sending handwritten letters in stamped addressed envelopes to residents registered with the library's home delivery service. And recipients were invited to respond by reflecting on their own experiences, how their lives have changed and their hopes for the future. I was particularly touched by one 86-year-old correspondent who replied with this message: "Thank you for giving me the chance to write a letter to someone. I used to love writing and receiving responses, especially from family. I love reading. I've been so pleased to have my books delivered to my door." What a fantastic tribute, and fantastic to read it out on the week where we celebrate the fact that councils can. From a public health point of view, the rate of alcohol-specific admissions to hospital is better than target. The Whiston Alcohol Care Team has continued to operate throughout the pandemic, continuing to assess and refer to community services. The Whiston team have also had additional funding to pilot national specification for alcohol care teams. And there are key links between Whiston and CGL to ensure that those who need community detox support are linked to the appropriate services. The 3-year rate of under 18 alcohol admissions fell in this quarter, and that corresponds to 8 fewer young people being hospitalised due to alcohol within that period, which of course is positive. But we do need to do more. The suicide rate is still high, although we are continuing to see the rates reducing. There were 5 fewer deaths in the first 3 months of 2020 than there were at the start of the reporting period, which of course is very positive. Programs such as OK to Ask and Offload continue to tackle mental health issues and improve well-being, with many programs being offered virtually due to COVID restrictions. But we do want to get down to our ambition of 0, no more. There will be a review of the current suicide prevention plan, and a new plan is proposed for March 2021. Teenage conceptions are also too high, and a range of actions are being undertaken to improve performance, including working to improve data access, actions with schools with the highest numbers, and insight work with the Family Nurse Partnership. And with regard to some of our services, whilst the introduction of the new innovative services have been welcomed, sadly, due to the amount of times the libraries and leisure centres, for example, have been closed due to COVID and the lockdowns, we will struggle to meet our revised target in Q2. We've seen a staggered approach to the reopening of indoor sports facilities, and many sites were only able to operate at 80% capacity, yet they still managed to attract nearly 70,000 visitors. Given the roller coaster that leisure centres have been on this year, with sports centres closed for the initial 4 months of the year and then having to partially close again in October, despite a brief reprieve, a new lockdown closure in November means that for the time being the target for the quarter appears to be unachievable, despite the service doing all it can to maximise safe access to sports and leisure facilities. However, looking forward, we do look forward to these services opening again as soon as it's safe to do so, as they are vitally important to deliver those vital public health outcomes, to keep us healthy and active, which is especially important as we continue to fight the virus. And just a final comment, I'd like to give huge thanks to everyone who has contributed to helping to deliver our priorities in this quarter. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Anthony. Thank you. Councillor Macaulay.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, I just thought I'd add some comments as well from my area, basically set out in page 77 and 78. But I'm going to start off with some good news, really, that Glass Futures, the progression of Glass Futures project, which is absolutely fantastic, continues to grow from strength to strength, with the announcement of the allocation of £9 million through the Build Back Better Fund via the Liverpool City region, and a further £15 million being awarded via UKRA to support the project. Development of the design, layout and internal fit out of the facility is progressing well, and we anticipate a detailed plan application coming forward for about December. Also, the local plan, it's past its next critical step and it's been submitted to the inspectorate, and we just wait now to hear when the public hearings are, but we expect those to be early in the new year. We're demonstrating strong performance in planning as planning applications continue to be determined within timescale. This is even more admirable given when you consider the whole service has been working from home since March. And even more encouraging is the fact that the borough has seen 269 new homes completed in this year between July and September. 171 net dwellings have been built, and I'm glad to say that 56% of which were affordable homes, which is so important in these hard times. But we do not rest on our laurels, and there's still much to do. Our local economy is teetering on the edge as it's impacted by enforced closures and restrictions. So it's no surprise that the town centres now have almost 30% of retail units vacant. As a proportion, this is a significant increase since Q1, and this could be the tip of the iceberg. So I therefore urge local residents that once the short circuit break lockdown comes to an end, to think local, to think and act local, actually, at Christmas and as we go into the new year. The council will continue to support hospitality and leisure services with financial assistance by setting up our very own grant support scheme, shaming the government into action, but most importantly, making sure that financial assistance gets to the valued businesses that need it most. We also continue to make significant progress on the town centre regeneration plans. The town deal board are working very hard to deliver a town investment plan to be submitted to government in January. In the meantime, the council has secured £2 million of external funding to invest in the recovery of the town centre before the summer of 2021. The investment will accelerate the demolition of Shalom Way car park to unlock key future development sites and provide a package of business support to businesses to aid the recovery of Earlstown and St Helens. Whilst we have seen 894 square metres of new employment floor space completed between April and September at Roundwood Drive and still in construction at Bahama Road on Adock Industrial Estate, we have not quite reached our target, but it's encouraging that planned applications are still coming through, and even more encouraging on top of that, that we're seeing end users at the end of that, which could be exampled by Home Bargains going to Amiga North, which recently got planning permission. So I'll leave it at that, Leader. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Can you hear me, David?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're on.
It was going funny. Thank you, Leader. Yes, my priority for my area of responsibility is priority 2, and it's promoting good health, independence and care. Obviously, the pandemic hit in March, or lockdown hit us in March, and the pressure within the departments throughout council increased tremendously. Within care, obviously, serious considerations had to be made of where care was delivered by our commissioned services and by the independent sector. And it was a whole new learning curve. I'm pleased to say that the department, the staff, have worked incredibly hard, but without the cooperation from our commissioned services out there, the general care homes, the agencies that provide support, it could have all fallen flat. I'm pleased to say that it didn't fall flat. Care was delivered to those that required it and wanted it, albeit some individuals and their families were very, very frightened and reluctant to let anyone into the homes. So where care was needed and wanted, it was there. And the department worked tremendously hard with the families of the individuals that didn't want to engage with care. One performance indicator that I'm really, really pleased about, that performed well, was out of 146 people that received short-term care, 125 hadn't gone on for long-term needs. What this really demonstrates is that early intervention, it is something when it first strikes, really pays off. It's promoted that independence while those people needed a helping hand initially, but it's gone on to give them the independence to live without that care ongoing. So that is a fantastic achievement. We had many safeguarding inquiries throughout lockdown, and in 1 month it really did blow a gasket, and that is being looked into. That was in September. But I am pleased to say that all safeguarding investigations have received a social worker visit within 2 working days of the initial strategy meeting. That demonstrates that anything that needed to go on for investigation was handled in a very timely manner and no delay was put there. At the end of Q2, out of 418 out of 464 elderly people, a total of 418 out of 464 people that were in nursing care are still in care or at home 91 days after receiving care. One of the performance indicators has been removed, and that is the delayed transfers of care from the hospital. That has been removed by NHS, so we can't report on that. All the performances, they're all performing well, some not as well as we expected, but given the challenge that pandemic actually threw at that department, and remembering that these were people that we were dealing with that needed support, I think we've done remarkable within St Helens with our workforce and with our partnerships, be it CCG, care homes and domiciliary agencies. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Marlene. Nova, Councillor Charlton.
Thanks, Chair. So on our performance report, I acknowledge that there is still significant challenges that exist within children's services. However, I would like to highlight the positive feedback that we received from Ofsted and the Department for Education during this quarter, and they've acknowledged the improvements that have been made since the ILACS inspection in 2019. So we acknowledge further performance requirements are still required, however, I would like to highlight some of the areas where we are showing an improvement and we're on a positive trajectory. So in terms of the number of children that we look after, we're beginning to see that reducing. We're ensuring that young people are leaving care safely, but it's quite positive that that number is coming down. The overall number of children and young people receiving support from statutory social care is also reducing. And the outcome for our care leavers is improving, which is excellent. I think in terms of what's going on nationally, we're actually bucking the trend in reducing our numbers. Again, looking at some of the support that we're offering for our special educational needs and disabilities, that's remained strong despite massive pressures on the service. And there's been a big turnaround in the last 12 months in the timelines for completing our education, health and care plans. So that area now was an area that we really struggled with, but the performance is very strong in that area. So, like, you know, I acknowledge there are significant challenges, but given the backdrop of COVID, I just think that our staff are just showing the dedication. They're showing innovation because they're having to find new ways of working, and I would just like to end by thanking the staff for their hard work and dedication.
Thanks very much, Nova. Thank you, everyone. If there are no more comments, is that report agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Councillor Gomez-Aspron, for bringing that report. Item 7 is the investment and acquisition strategy. Councillor Macaulay.
Thanks, Leader. Members will have seen that a revised investment, land and property acquisition strategy report has been published earlier today. The specific amendments are contained in paragraph 4.6 to the report and in the approval process at page 22 of the strategic document to include relevant and updated members to the investment property acquisition group. Turning to the report, the purpose of adopting this strategy is to establish a strategic framework to secure long-term sustainable income streams for the council, thereby increasing our financial resilience over time. This is not about taking financial risks in areas unfamiliar to the council, but instead about investing in the borough to support our economic prosperity and corporate objectives. The council is facing unprecedented financial challenges. However, the borough's development potential provides the opportunity to play a greater role in the future growth whilst generating financial returns to support the delivery of vital services. Historically, we have not actively pursued the acquisition of properties or land purely for investment return purposes, and those purchases that have been taken have generally been for operational or regenerational reasons. However, we recognise that a formal approach relating to strategic acquisitions and further commercial investment purposes is required to ensure decisions are made in a clear and appropriate manner. The strategy, therefore, sets out the key objectives for acquiring land and property for investment purposes. The considerations when acquiring property is an investment along with associated risks, financial implications, and the protocol to be adopted in consideration of any potential acquisitions. Acquisitions that support and drive the borough's growth agenda will also have a potential to deliver significant financial and economic benefits and must be included within our investment thinking. Whilst the acquisition of property is not new to the council, our governance arrangements need to align with what is a very competitive and fast-moving market. This, therefore, requires the extension of existing delegated powers to allow decisions to be made within often tight commercial timescales. The acquisition protocol sets out the strategy details, the establishment of a land and property acquisition fund together with an investment land and property acquisition group who would meet to consider and approve acquisitions in a timely manner. The primary focus will be to acquire investments within the borough. Acquisitions will generally be made on the basis that they present a long-term income stream. However, acquisitions may be made on the basis that they provide a strategic benefit or support regeneration. I truly believe by adopting this strategy will help us grow the borough to the one that we all want to see. I therefore formally move the recommendations on page 102 of your papers, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions. Thanks, Leader.
Thanks, Councillor Macaulay. Are there any comments or questions from colleagues? Councillor Gomez-Aspron.
Thank you, Chair. It's an interesting strategy, this. It's just something that we've never really done, but always needed to do. And it's another thing that other authorities around us are trailblazing on. So we always get compared to authorities that are doing this type of stuff locally. And now we can say we're actually going to compete in that arena, which is fantastic. And I think it's important to explain the money aspect of it, because the public see the figure that is attached in the report and wonder why that's a figure that we can spend when we're cutting services in other areas. And it's that idea of capital versus revenue. And through good financial management, the council has got a capital reserve which we can use for this type of stuff. Now, that's one-off lump sums that can be used to generate an income then. That isn't the same as the revenue that the government have chopped over the last 10 years to the tune of nearly 100 million quid a year. So there's a distinct difference. And I always compare it to capital is like your life savings, revenue is like your salary. If you start using your savings to cover your salary and give up your job, you'll eventually run out of money, so it's not sustainable. But what you can do is invest those savings to bring in a return that then means you can spend it living the way that you want to live, which is exactly what we need to do. We have an opposition who does nothing but moan. I've seen them moaning about this already online today, and the fact it will flop. So they say they want us to be more like surrounding authorities and then moan when we try to be. And they say they want more houses, then moan when they're built near their house. And it's just a common theme. It's easy to moan. And what I want to hear is some alternative suggestions. If they fancy giving us any thoughts on any of the stuff they want to moan about, then I'm all ears. But I imagine it'll be a long wait, so we might as well crack on doing what we do and running the council well, while they get stuck in the rut of moaning. So I welcome this report because, like you say, there's two things. There's the investing capital money to bring in revenue to offset government cuts, which is perfect. That's what we should be doing. And then there's the other aspect of buying up strategic pieces of either land in town centres and district centres, or areas that we might want to give a kickstart regeneration on brownfield sites that are installed in tricky ownership. So there's loads of different things we can do with this fund, and that ultimately lets us deliver the priorities of the people in the borough. So we know what their priorities are. They repeatedly tell us. So I think it's a fantastic strategy, and I look forward to working on it. And it's key that we do this to offset the cuts that are coming from government, because they aren't stopping, and they're coming to the tune of 20 million quid within the next 12 months. So it's vital that we do this to offset that, and it will never fix the 100 million quid a year they've chopped since 2010. But if we can do it wisely and do it well, it will mean our residents see less cuts than they would have if we didn't do this. So I support it wholeheartedly, and I'm happy to get behind it.
Thanks, Councillor Gomez-Aspron. Any more questions or comments? Okay, just before we move to the vote, then I just want to thank Councillor Macaulay and officers who've worked very hard on developing this strategy ready for discussion today. As Councillor Gomez-Aspron has just said, the pot of 10 million is funded from capital receipts. It's money that cannot be used for services. What we can do if we invest responsibly and successfully. Sorry, someone's not on mute. I can hear. Sorry. What we can do if we invest responsibly and successfully with it is generate income which can be used to fund services. Historically, as Richard said, we've been very risk averse, and we can and should do more to strike the right balance. We'll always be responsible with public money, but we need to be more ambitious and creative. As Richard also said, up to now we haven't actively pursued the acquisition of properties or land purely for investment return purposes, and those purchases that have taken place have generally been operational for operational or regeneration reasons. Church Square Shopping Centre is the most well-known example of that type of investment, and that purchase is crucial to unlocking the regen in St Helens Town Centre. This strategy that we're hopefully going to agree today, and the approach it will enable from now on, is something fundamentally more profound than what we've done before. This is a formal approach to strategic acquisitions for commercial investment purposes, and we need to take this approach to generate income in new ways that don't hit residents and businesses in the pocket, and this strategy and governance arrangements will ensure that decisions are made in a clear and an appropriate manner. So I absolutely support Councillor Macaulay's recommendations, and I would ask Cabinet to support it as well. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thanks, everybody. And that concludes today's business. Thank you, officers, and thank you, Cabinet, for your time. Thank you.